We do record these so they can be later sent out to those who are registered for this. So if you're registered for it, that's assuming how you got the link, you'll getting the recording as a follow-up, and any notes or resources we would like to share with you. Anyway, we recognize you might be sitting with your significant other on this. You might not. You might be able to attend with them. That might not be where you're at in your journey right now. So yeah, we notice and recognize a lot of the names that are in the participant list, and just want to tell you we love you and we're really glad that you're hanging out with us tonight. I often tell men that come to this, when I give them an introduction of what this could look like, that a lot of times when you leave this, it might create some really hard conversations that have already existed, which will be full of triggers. The hope is the outcome, whether it's a few hours later, days later, or months later, there's some positive things that come from this webinar. Conflict is not bad. Healthy conflict is not bad. It has the opportunity to lead to intimacy. So that's what we hope for you tonight. Alana, you good with me just sharing some of the normal things that happen in this call?
Yep, go right ahead.
All right. So if you've never been here before, please use the Q&A button at the very bottom when you have questions. We have things that get submitted ahead of time, things that you'll submit during the call. Please use that compared to the chat function, because we organize and keep on track with the Q&A part. There's a chance we won't get to everything. It seems like we don't normally, which I don't know, Alana. The thing that goes through my head is it was such a vulnerable thing for you to do and a hard thing to get a question, to even ask the question if it doesn't get answered. Like, ugh. So that goes through my head. So just wanted to let you know we do our best that we can get there. We do try to save them for later so we can pull them back in. What am I not bringing up, Alana, in the normal?
Using the Q&A, it is recorded, but even though it's recorded, your names and your information is not anywhere on the recording. If you ask a question and you would like the question not read word for word, just make sure you let us know that. We won't have your voice on here, but we will read the question out loud and answer the question. And then tonight we decided we're going to start a little different. And did we go over this, Luke, sorry, I'm answering a question from someone who's having a hard time getting in. Did you talk about starting out of order tonight?
No. So what we're going to do is, because we don't get questions, we don't get to all the questions, we're actually going to start off with them this time. We're going to start off in this manner. Okay, so y'all think about this. If you could get one thing from tonight, what would you want to get? What would your hopes to be? If you could put that in do we want that in the Q&A or the chat, Alana?
Let's go with the chat, actually.
Okay, so if you could get one thing from tonight, what do you hope you would get? We want to develop a theme out of this. So go ahead and take a moment, throw that in the chat. And then normally you can throw questions in the Q&A. Go ahead and do that too. We're hoping to save more time. And the reason we're getting it out of order is because we do always run out of time. So
also, as you're thinking about this, think through the lens of what do I want to get out of this as an individual? And what do I hope my relationship can get out of this? So think about that. Put your answers in the chat. And then while we're waiting for answers to come in, there's something that I keep thinking about tonight that I'm just going to throw out there. And I don't know where this is going to go, and I'm not going to take very long with it. But a lot of the work I do when working with couples, and Luke, I'm going to say you're probably similar, has to do with patterns that happen in the relationship, patterns that happen within ourselves. And these patterns that we have can be really hard to break. And when we have had a long relationship that has been built off of patterns that have stayed for a really long time, trying to break these patterns is really, really challenging. And a lot of times these patterns start in our childhood. A lot of times these patterns that we're showing up with are not patterns that we even necessarily chose. We were conditioned to follow. I had an aha the other day of a pattern that I am doing that my mother did with my dad that drove me nuts as a child. And I recognized at a whole new level that I still do this pattern in my own relationship today. And it has been really uncomfortable having this awareness and recognizing this, but also really empowering because it allows me the ability to start looking and breaking the pattern. But something happens within us when we start trying to break patterns and happen within the people around us. What happens is our brains like to stay in this place of homeostasis. It's kind of like if we are always used to the house being 72 degrees. It's the way it's always been. We've gotten used to 72 degrees. Now, some people, 72 degrees is going to be way too cold. And for other people, 72 degrees is going to be too hot. But we've gotten used to 72 degrees. Doesn't mean we necessarily like it. But as soon as we start monkeying with that temperature, our brains want to get back to what is normal and what we're used to. Our brains try to get back to this homeostasis. And so when we start to break patterns, our brains have a way of trying to put things back the way they were, even when we logically don't want to. So for example, if I decided, you know what, I'm not going to eat sugar anymore. I'm going to cut sugar out completely. Well, and I've done this multiple times in my life as I'm like, I'm not going to eat sugar. And I'll tell Luke, hey, I'm not going to eat sugar. It gives me headaches. I don't feel good. I don't want to do this. And the amount of times after telling him that within the next day or two that he will bring home a box of chocolates or a box of donuts, or he brings something home. And actually science has shown that the reason our brains do this is subconsciously, he's trying to keep the patterns of what we were, of the way things were. And so what it can feel so infuriating of like, you're trying to sabotage me, or I will sabotage myself. It is our brain's way of trying to maintain that homeostasis of what we're used to. Now, what in the heck does this have to do with recovering from or repairing after betrayal? Well, so many patterns need to change. We need to let the old relationship die. And we have to start building this new relationship. But we have to, unfortunately, work against our biology to break these patterns. And to be able to break these patterns takes risk at some level on both parts. And it takes a certain level of sitting with uncomfortability as we're breaking these patterns. So that's you're just getting in Alana's brain. It's just been on my mind for the last couple of days, is as we talk tonight about some of the things that are put in the chat and some of the questions that come up, I want you just to be thinking about your own patterns, because the reality is I can't change Luke and how he's responding. Trust me, I have tried for a lot of years. You can't change other people. But what I can do is I can look at my patterns. I can look at my responses, and I can start breaking those patterns myself. Luke can look at his patterns and his responses, and he can start breaking those himself. And then together as a relationship, especially when we're doing our relational work, we can start working on those patterns together. Okay, I'm going to leave it at that. My brain is like pulling up like a whole nother topic that I'm going to leave it at that. Do you want to add to that at all, Luke?
Yeah, just for clarification, for those of you who are wondering, they were Krispy Kreme donuts and it was chocolate covered cinnamon bears, just in case you're wondering what kind of chocolate and what kind of donuts. So just want to let you know. And Alana, my mouse died, so I'm not going to be any help from navigating questions. I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Thanks for letting me know.
Okay, so let me reiterate for those of you who just jumped on, please put in the chat anything, what you hope you could get from this webinar this evening? Anything you could hope you would get individually and for your relationship? And notice when Alana said for your relationship, I didn't interpret that necessarily to mean that my partner could understand. It meant that would be for the relationship itself. Okay, so we have some that have been popping up in here.
Okay, so I'm just going to start at the top. The first one that popped up is goals for tonight. Learn how to be empathetic in the moment instead of getting defensive and not realizing it until it's too late. And then ironically, another one just popped in, not getting defensive when trying to talk through triggers. So I think defensiveness is probably a really good place to start. Big sigh with that.
Big sigh, big sigh. What I want to highlight there is the part, because I can hear from this person who put in there that last part and not realizing until it's too late. So the fact is for this person, there is it's too late. And feel free to, for the person who put this in there, what do you mean by until it's too late? When is too late? And while you're putting that in, I just want to emphasize a really, really big part of this journey is the rupture and repair part, which is I call it the cleaning up my messes. So I'll sit with myself later and go, oh, I didn't show up with my values intact. I run into a whole bunch of residual behaviors, defensiveness, over talking, shutting down, whatever it might be. I wasn't able to be empathetic in the moment and feeling like I lost my chance. Like, crap. And so much of the healing is being able to circle back to that. And that's often what I've experienced is the person that's been betrayed is asking for is consistency. Consistency does not mean perfection in moment. It means the ability for the humility to exist, to come back to the conversation later and say, hey, can we talk about that again? And the addict brain goes, never, ever, ever do that. Because if you ever get peace in your relationship, if you ever get that where things are okay, let it be. Do never disrupt something when it seems like there's peace. What's interesting is just because you're experiencing that peace or that lack of conflict doesn't mean that it's not existing for the other person.
Oh, I want to stay on that thought for just a minute. That's really big because I see this a lot in the person who has betrayed. That as soon as they feel okay, then they kind of blanket that everything is okay or the relationship is okay. And so many of my betrayed partners have this great fear of, if I act okay, or if I let myself be happy, or if I take my walls down, then my partner is going to think everything's okay now. And the reality is this isn't often an unfounded worry. That often can come with a lot of times when we've had these years of selfishness, there is a cognitive distortion of the all or nothing or black and white thinking that happens and that we've spent often a lifetime in. And so we do go to this, everything is bad or everything is okay. So a lot of my betrayed partners have experienced of, if I'm leaning into the relationship at all, then all of a sudden the partner who has hurt me, they think everything's okay. And so they get scared to let down their walls. They get scared to be happy. They get scared to be vulnerable or lean into the relationship, because then it's like, oh, good, we're all better and we can move forward. And then everything inside of them is screaming of like, but I'm still in pain. This still isn't okay. This still isn't healed. Oh no, I have to stay angry or I have to keep my walls up so you can see that we still have to do work.
I love that. Can you comment so there's more clarification going from this person that says, it's too late, meaning that I don't realize it's an opportunity to hold space and be empathetic until after I've gotten defensive and caused more pain.
Can you explain, Luke, why you see in working in working with so many people who have betrayed, why does the betrayer get defensive? Why is that so common and almost automatic?
Yeah. Shame. I'm not enough for this person. I'm the relationship's on the line, and I need to convince them that what they're seeing is not accurate. I am enough. I am okay. What's happening inside their brain is that battle of I need to be okay, and I'm afraid that they're going to see me, and that's the explosion that happens. And it's the beginning work. Part of the work for them is to go, all right, my spouse doesn't define whether I'm enough. That comes from inside. Because you think about it, the very concept which is happening around is behavior, and you wouldn't want to voice to your spouse like, hey, I'm a good guy, and when she's telling you, look at what you did. So that has to come from inside, and they're trying to convince themselves of it that I'm okay, and it's done in a really destructive manner.
You said, I'm afraid they're going to see me.
Mhm.
That's really powerful, because that's what intimacy truly is allowing ourselves to be seen by the other person and really seeing the other person. So I heard in that in that shame, there's also levels of self-protection that are happening when that defensiveness comes up. And so this is really important. There's two pieces of this in the work that are really essential that we understand and make space for. The first one is the individual work around shame. Where did those messages come, and where did they start of me not being enough? And how has that been reinforced in my life? Me reinforcing that in my life, and how has that been triggered? But then there's also this relational piece. And I think sometimes in this journey, the narrative so gets focused around of do your own work, do your own work, do your own work. And you have to work on the me to be able to do the we. But there's not enough focus on relationally. You can do all the individual work in the world, but that does not heal the relationship. Relational work takes a certain level, takes a lot of work of learning how to bring in then you as an individual and start navigating what it's like when walls are coming up together. And I see people really get good in doing their individual work and think in their head that should fix the relational piece, and it doesn't cross over. And so we have to work on shame as an individual, but then we also have to be able to work at and shame that shows up relationally as it's happening live, which is why I really like EFT therapy for when we're later in the journey and we're really diving into more of that deeper relational work.
Yes. And it not only doesn't heal it, sometimes it can make it look worse. So one of the first things that was said to me in therapy was, therapist said, hey, Luke, you're not your choices. And what immediately came to mind, what my mind was, is you are wrong. And I pray to God that you are right. You are wrong, and I pray to God that you're right. I wanted desperately to believe so much that I wasn't my choices, but that did not make any sense to me. So I went through this journey of like, okay, I'm not my choices, and then developing that accountability in my journey for healing. And what can be really stuck is when I go, okay, I'm learning to like myself. And then my wife sharing all these things where I cause pain. And then I get frustrated that she's not having a similar experience as me. And then it causes me to lose lose patience and energy inside of that relationship and humility too.
That you are not your choices. If you are a partner who has been betrayed and you just heard that and you had emotional response to that, I just want to validate that, because I remember when Luke came home from therapy and it was a really impactful thing to him that he said, like, the therapist said this to me, and everything in me is like, what the hell? You are your choices. You chose to do this. Don't you shirk off this responsibility. And all sorts of protections for me came up. And it took a while of me doing my own work to recognize who Luke was at his core. He was not his choices. He was living outside of his value system. He was making choices that he was not happy with. I was not happy with, but he at his core was not his choices. And sometimes I'll explain it this way. When I'm working with betrayed part, well, actually, I'll do this with men too, but I'll say, okay, I have this little baby. Does, like a newborn baby, I'm holding it in front of you. Does this baby have value? And most everybody goes, yeah, of course it has value. Why? And I'll get lots of different answers on why people think it has value. And I'll say, okay, but they'll, like, a lot of times people will say, like, well, it has the potential. And I say, okay, well, if it has the potential, then it doesn't yet. No, it does have value. Why? Because it came, like, to be here and be alive, you have value and worth. And then I go, okay, well, what point does this baby lose their value? Do they lose it at 2 when they have a tantrum? Do they lose it at 12 when they start talking back to their mom? Do they lose it at 20 when they, I don't know, get a ticket, a speeding ticket? Like, is it their choices that make them lose their value? This baby is still inherently the same person. The value is still there. The value of who they are is still whole and complete. But we can lose sight of that. Now, this does not give anyone like a free pass for poor behavior. People still have to be accountable to their choices, but their choices are separate from their value. And if you're betrayed and you can't hold that yet and make space for that, it's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to hold anything right now for them. But I just want to plant that seed and know that can be hard, but it's so incredibly important for the person who has been living outside of their value system, often for years or a lifetime. So important as part of their own healing to learn to recognize and embrace their self-worth and who they are at their core.
So you just spoke to the betrayed saying, hey, if you can't, if that's not something it's not what you can do right now, that's okay. And I want to speak to the person that was betrayed going, for self, if you can't see yourself in that way, like, my choices don't define me, because that's not what the world tells you. That's the work. And if you go in here like, hey, I really hope my spouse heard that, hey, I'm not my choices, still your work. Like, that's so important to you. That says that's what we're talking about, which is, I need other people to see that. That's not intrinsic. That's not about myself. That's not finding worthiness within self. It's needing other people. That's the journey.
And you cannot heal from this journey. You cannot recover through self-hatred. You can temporarily have breaks from the acting out, but to do real healing and progress forward, it cannot be done through self-hatred. It has to be done with learning how to find your own value, find your own worth, and learn to have healthy self-compassion, empathy for yourself, and then to be able to give that to your partner. Because how many betrayed partners are saying, I just want empathy? To be able to offer empathy to them, you're going to have to find it for you. You have to find it for you to be able to really give it to them.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. I know we've gotten off topic. Back to the defensiveness. I think it's really important if we talk about what it's like for the betrayed, the person who has been betrayed, when their partner gets defensive. And I feel like I've been talking a lot. Do you
What
want
is-
to?
I just read. Can you repeat one time, please?
Come on, Luke.
I know.
Um, what is it like for the betrayed partner when they see defensiveness?
What is it like for the betrayed partner when they see defensiveness?
Yeah.
And
So
they're wanting me
as
to
a
tackle this?
betrayed partner, yeah, I should probably answer this.
I mean, I could attempt and you could clean it up from your
Okay,
experience.
attempt. Humor me.
Um, well, you got defensiveness, which is like ego. It's like the defensive likeness, like, which is like, you're wrong, like you don't see it, like blah, 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 like in your face. And then you have the defensiveness of shutting down, like going like, I can't take your emotional reaction. So I'm just going to kind of hunker down and weather the storm. And I know for the weather your storm, the walling off, I just keep hearing about it's like, stop, like, don't leave me. Like, don't abandon this conversation. Don't leave me alone. And then the person's betrayed, talking a lot more to try to get them to come out of the shell. And this is where they become very fall into old patterns of, I'm only going to say the things to you that's not going to make you go into your shell. I'm going to, shoot. I really want to get this out, Alana. I really want to say this. Okay, the defensiveness drives the betrayed partner crazy because they lose the other person. They're dying for connection. They're dying for intimacy. They want it. That's the healthy marriage. And then you see that person defensiveness, and then they're like, I'm alone. I'm feeling alone. I want that connection. And then they start to show up in ways to get that person to not be defensive. Maybe they stop talking. Maybe they talk more. Maybe they start sugarcoating things. Maybe they get really, really fierce, and anything to start to get them to reconnect and not to go to defensiveness. And, it's just that desire to stay connected. That's what I see.
Well, yeah. And what you're talking about, that's the attachment part of us. And when they go to defensiveness, two things happen. One, with the attachment, is they're not available to me anymore. And so we have natural instinctive defenses that come up with that. And after we've been betrayed, well, even I see this in couples who don't have the betrayal, but we can get the fight, the flight, the freeze. But then we can also get the fawning, which is the submit of like, how do I be people pleasing, and how do I be compliant, and how do I make you happy so you'll come back to me? Or we'll also get attachment cries, which is the clinging, the crying out for help, the terrified of abandonment, waiting by the phone, that kind of stuff. So that's one thing that we see is those attachment pieces. But then also when we've been through betrayal, your brain, so the way when we come to this world is our brains are wired of, I'm safe until you prove me otherwise. But when you go through betrayal, that flips that. And it's now, I'm not safe unless you prove otherwise. And so my betrayed partners are going around the world going, am I safe? Am I safe? Are you safe? Is this safe? Is this conversation safe? And so everything is going through this lens of, am I safe? And so the minute we get hyper vigilance, the minute we get defensiveness, all of the alarms in the head are going, not only attachment of, oh no, they're not here for me, but the trauma brain is going, I'm not safe. They're defensive. I'm not safe. And so when we don't feel safe, our instinctive defenses kick in: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or attachment cry. And then we just start responding and reacting to each other. And now we start having the patterns happening.
And this is the part where that, like you said, when we're born, that safety exists, like we give it. How did you phrase it? You said it flips, right? We don't have to, we even acknowledge that sometimes it's flipped before the marriage even happens, that now safety is sought even before, if there's been some kind of attachment injury prior to the marriage, which can make it extra complex.
Well, one thing, okay, so I'm pulling the instinctive defenses. I love to give resources on here. I have this little, it's not little, it's huge, but it's called the Trauma Recovery Guidebook for Therapists. And they actually have a small version online. You can order this, and it's great on understanding trauma. And I'll actually see if I can send something out with a recording that shows these. But take a screenshot if you're interested. Instinctive defenses. But the thing that I really want to highlight right here is it says, as we age, the instinctive defenses become more complex and more habituated. So if you have childhood trauma, it is going to be even more complex and even more habituated. And the older you are and the longer these patterns have happened in your relationship, the more complex they're going to be and the more habituated they're going to be, which unfortunately means the more work to unravel these. But you can. It is possible to unravel these. We just have to know what we're working on.
Yeah. Are we at a place where we can move on in some of this stuff?
Yes, I think so. If anyone has specific questions on this topic, let us know. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm looking for themes in here because a lot of y'all are thinking in the same ways, which means you're a similar place in your journey. And by the way, thanks to the person who says, when I get defensiveness, I cause more pain. So I realized there was a missed opportunity. I want to reassure you that healings exists in the voicing that there was a missed opportunity. So don't stay hung up on I missed the opportunity. So game over. I have to wait for next time. No, game is not over. I get to come back to that conversation and recognize that her response at the end of the day, it's important for you to look at your own values and saying, how do I want to show up? And instead of looking for the conversation to end in hugs and high fives and slaps on the butt, that's not the goal. The goal is to be hearing your partner and staying grounded and connected to yourself.
I don't think we've ever had a conversation that ended with slaps on the butt. I just, I don't, it sounds like maybe something that happened in the locker room, but no.
I don't know why you say that. I think I've been saying that for a while
now. Okay, but it did make me think of something. It made me think of an analogy with a Velcro. We all want, like, think of Velcro. One side you have the little hook, and if I could screen share, I mean, I could screen share, but I'm not going to. But what Velcro looks like, on one side you have this this little hook that has this thing that can pull. The other side is soft and fuzzy. Our brains are hardwired to avoid pain, seek pleasure, do things with the least amount of energy possible. So in the seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, we're always looking for the fuzzy side of Velcro. We're looking for things to be soft and easy and fuzzy. But if I have soft and fuzzy and soft and fuzzy, we're never actually going to have the sticking them together relationally. And this is what Luke and I did for years, is we never fought. And we were like, oh, we never fight. Like, we're just best friends. We never fight. But the truth is we were never willing to face the hard or let hooks be in the relationship. And so we never actually were able to connect at a deep level because we were so focused on keeping it soft and fuzzy. And so in the deeper relational work, when there are ruptures, and there will always be ruptures because we are human and that's part of having human interactions, that when we have these ruptures, when we lean in and let there be hard, those are the hooks that allow us to hook in and have that deeper level connection. We cannot have this deeper level connection if we're always trying to keep it soft and fuzzy. Now, do I want you to say things with kindness and empathy and compassion? Sure, yes. But when I'm talking about the hooks, I am talking about taking that risk, leaning in and being vulnerable. And when we have betrayal in initial stages, I'm asking the partner who has betrayed to really allow yourself these hooks. So when there is rupture, leaning into the discomfort, and instead of always trying to show up and protect yourself with the soft fuzzy, be willing to let yourself be seen. Let that vulnerability come out. Let there be these hooks so we actually have something relationally to hold on to.
I love that. And then kind of, let's talk about this part. It's not one person playing the role of the person that's the hook and one person being the soft person. That's the experience within self. And that's the part. It's like the being willing to be seen, being willing to let your guard down and somebody else see you, and at the risk of being rejected. And I'm talking to the person that did the betraying, and Alana, you can speak to the person that was betrayed. But letting them see me, that's the hook.
You know, it's our therapist gave us an analogy. And he talked about, and I don't know if I'm even going to do this justice, but he talked and he said, okay, he was so funny. He like ran around the office looking. He said, okay, I have 2 pens here. I have a blue pen and I have a black pen. And he said, with the black pen, I want you to share with the other person just kind of how you feel about something. But with the blue pen, he said, the blue pen, this is what really is important and valuable to us. It's so important to us that we want to protect it and we want to hold it. And it's really, 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 really special to us. And a lot of times this pen is so special to us that we don't want anyone to use it because they might hurt it or break it or lose it. And so we really, really protect this blue pen. But what happens is we get upset because our partner uses the black pen when we really, really want them to use the blue pen. But the blue pen, we also don't really want them to touch the blue pen or see the blue pen because the blue pen is so vulnerable. And as he gave this analogy, by the way, he did it a lot better than I did, and he made us do a whole exercise with it. But as he gave this analogy of these really, really, really tender feelings, I didn't want Luke to see my blue pen. I didn't even want him to see it. I wanted my blue pen held so tight that it's like this because I didn't want to be more hurt by him. And not only by him, but I had been so hurt by men in my life that it was like, I cannot show this blue pen. I can't show this blue pen. But at the same time, I am crying and I'm hurt because he doesn't see my blue pen and he won't hold my blue pen and I won't show my blue pen. And so our therapist was trying to help us understand that at some level, at some point, me as a betrayed partner will have to start letting this blue pen be a little bit seen. And for me, that had to be in the right way, in the right time. Now, the whole reason I got on this is for so much of our marriage, I thought I was giving him the blue pen. Because I would talk about my feelings. I'm pretty self-aware. And I would talk about my feelings, but I would talk about my feelings through the black pen. I would talk about them, but I wasn't actually being vulnerable or letting myself be seen. So I did a lot of black pen, thinking that we were still like really close and really connected. But this deeper level of connection meant that there's going to be some level of risk and some level of letting him see my pen. And my betrayed brain that's been hurt so much says, why in the world would you let anyone see or hold or touch that blue pen? Because it's so valuable and they might hurt it. But at the same time, I want nothing more than for him to see and hold and understand my blue pen. So you can see this dilemma that happens here. But all of this being said, Luke has a blue pen and a black pen. Luke has tender vulnerabilities that he doesn't want to share. And a lot of times addiction and selfishness and defensiveness all are things that are hiding and protecting his blue pen. But there's still that inherent deep down wanting to be seen and wanting to connect. So learning what are your black pens moments and what are your blue pen moments, I think can be a really valuable exercise just as your own personal self-reflection. What did I leave out on that?
I don't know. Can I just share what my blue pen's like?
Yeah.
This was an interesting analogy that he shared with us, because when I was watching it, I'm like, what the hell is he talking about? I don't even know what I think what he's going through. What's this blue pen and black pen thing? And I've been thinking about it nonstop, trying to decide what my blue pen is. And then it's just become more and more clear to me. It's the things that I don't want to share, just like Alana, that I don't want to share because I don't know if I'm ready for the response. I don't know what she'll do with that information. My number one thing is I'm afraid that I'm just afraid that at the end of the day, that if I share it, will anything be different, or will I just feel more broken or feel like I'm not enough more? And until I start recognizing that I don't want to be seen still, the more I'm going to stay stuck in my patterns.
Yeah. There's that fear of being seen and being hurt and being rejected that comes on both parts.
Yeah.
Both individuals are feeling this in different ways and at different levels, but both couples are feeling this. And I'll just, if you weren't here last month, go back to last month's recording, because we talk about the intimacy pyramid that talks about building up with that safety and that transparency and getting to that level of deeper intimacy. But intimacy into me see, and how much into me do we allow ourselves to see, and then how much do we allow others to see?
I want to attempt to explain something that holds a lot of value for me. So here's my blue pen for the group, and we'll see how this comes. And this isn't a podcast, so we can't edit it, Alana. So here we go. Terry Rill has a book called It's Audio, It's Fears, Intimacy. And I really don't like a lot of the stuff that he has in there, because it's not made for people that are going through betrayal trauma. One of the things he talks about is the one up, one down thing, where, in a relationship, you can live in a place of grandiosity, which is like, I'm better than somebody else, or that one down where I'm inferior to another person. And my behavior that I'd been holding in secrecy, as soon as it came out, I always knew I was one down, but now everybody else knows. And I better show up in one down right now, because I'm no good, right? So what I'll do is I'll live in one down until I can come up from that, if I ever can. And that was permission that I would have been given by somebody to say, hey, Luke, you're enough now. You've showed up consistently enough that now you're worthy of connection, you're worthy of love, you're worthy of trust, you're worthy of safety, all those kinds of things. And really a bunch of stuff happened in that. I want to recognize, like, that blue pen experience, unless I learn to have empathy for myself and self-love, but have accountability still, I can't really show my blue pen, because it's hard. And I want to speak to the person that's been the betraying, like, it's pretty hard to show yourself your blue pen when that other person you feel like isn't worthy of seeing the blue pen. Now recognize, again, the first part of the journey is you have to navigate this, but ultimately there's a space where you will get here, and it's not around. Anyway, I'm going to stop there. That was my blue pen, just sharing that because it means so much to me, and wondering if I'll articulate it the way that I want to.
Well, it's funny because we said we were going to get off this a while ago, and
we're still here.
We're still here.
We're still here.
But Let me, because we only have 10 minutes left. Let me look here. Okay, so here's another one, Luke. Someone said they desire to have better understanding and awareness of selfishness. And I actually think we can pull this into our whole discussion. What are your thoughts on how selfishness plays into this?
Selfishness plays into, what was that again?
Everything that we've been talking about, just these patterns and the self-protection.
Well, okay, the selfishness, we talked about that in group tonight. So I have a 180 group right before this, and I can see some of the guys are on here, which is awesome. That means they've stuck around for 2.5 hours. Okay, so selfishness exists for a reason. There's a reason. And we don't selfishness exists usually because some type of family of origin experience. Our needs weren't met, and we realized we had to fend for ourselves. And if we didn't fend for ourselves, we weren't going to be okay. So we survived. And we didn't look at what other people, we looked at other people as we kind of had to show up in certain ways and in order to get what we needed. So that selfishness came from survival, but we carried that into a place that that behavior didn't need to exist anymore because we had a partner that was technically ready to be a teammate. They weren't the same thing as our family of origin, those attachments inside of there. So that coping mechanism that needs a survival never shifted. And so we put that our partner in that same situation, in that same environment. And maybe we identified somebody that fed into those patterns, that really liked fixing things for us or whatever it was, telling us that we're enough and all those types of things. So that's how Alana, do you want to go from there?
Yeah. Yes, selfishness comes from that place of survival, and addiction is inherently selfish. And addiction doesn't just start with I'm automatically addicted. There is this more and more of moving into addiction starts with like this coping mechanism, and then the coping mechanisms start becoming habituated or patterns, and then those patterns start to become an addiction. But to protect the addiction, it breeds selfishness. So the longer we're in addiction, the more our brain becomes wrapped around this self-focus. And so we have that extra layer. We have that piece of it. We have it as a survival technique, often from childhood. And then we also have, there are cultural pieces that can show up. Cultural pieces of, I'll say, entitlement that can show up, that can also feed the selfishness. And so I think part of selfishness and part of unraveling selfishness is similar to what we've been talking about, is starting to recognize the patterns of what ways it's showing up. And selfishness is tricky because our brain has all sorts of protections and denial, like self-denial of not wanting to see our selfishness. Now I'm talking to the partner who's betrayed, because a lot of my partners who have been betrayed tend to be overly not selfish because they've been in this submit, that they tend to be self-sacrificing to the point that it's unhealthy. And because when they've been in a relationship with somebody who has been, this is for my addicted ones, who have been in a relationship with someone who has had addiction for so many years, to be able for them to survive, they've needed a certain level of selfishness as a coping mechanism. And so going back to these patterns of recognizing which ways selfishness has shown up and how do we step out of it. Also, I'm going to give this little chart. And this will make some of you uncomfortable, and I'm sorry. But okay, this, let's see, selfish and selfless. Okay, I am so sorry that I'm not using my whiteboard on my computer. This shows how old school I am because I love to write everything handwritten. But if we had this spectrum from selfish on this side and selfless on the other, and let's say this is kind of just our middle ground. Well, what can happen is if in your family of origin, you got messages on on how you are to show up. And if you had to survive in your family of origin, and part of your way you survived was to be selfish, let's say, and the more trauma you have, and this was your survival technique, the further over here you can be. But let's just say that you're about right here on the side. By the way, selfish in its most extreme form is narcissism, and narcissism is based in insecurity, just a side note. But at its most is narcissism, and selfless at its most is self-sacrificing to the point of losing yourself. But if you have somebody who is over here in this level of selfish, most likely they are going to have a spouse or partner who is equal levels away from the middle. And the reason is because if this person was with somebody who was equally selfish, there would be constant conflict and contention, and they probably wouldn't end up together. So the selfish person is looking for someone to be selfless. And again, this selflessness can come from your role as a family of origin, but it can also come as a coping mechanism on being able to try to keep the peace, try to keep that fuzziness, keep everything okay, that we can get this. So the question becomes, how do we break out of these patterns? How do we get to this middle ground where we have a healthy level of times where we are able to put ourselves first, and other times where we're able to be selfless and sacrifice? Because it's healthy to have both, but it's knowing when and where. And the way that we come back towards the middle, I need a new pen. This pen is not good. The way we come back towards the middle is learning healthy boundaries for ourselves and healthy boundaries for the relationship. And then it's starting to deconstruct why we took on these roles. What in our family of origin told us or taught us that we needed to start taking on these roles? What things kept those roles going throughout our lives? And what ways are they showing up today? And then as we start to unravel that and break that down, while learning and working on boundaries and learning what this middle part looks like of how to put ourselves on the table while also knowing when it's healthy to sacrifice and to give and to be selfless, and learning how to find, wait, it wasn't in the middle, learning how to find that healthy middle, that is going to be part of our work as we're unraveling selfishness. And I'm super visual, so I hope that was helpful.
That was really cool. Yeah. Hey, there was a question that came up in the Q&A, which is, can you share some specific examples around what Velcro hooks, what examples of what the Velcro hooks are in the analogy? So maybe we could kind of close out with that.
Yeah. I'm trying to think for betrayed or betrayer. Do you want to start, Luke, with any Velcro hooks for the person who has betrayed?
Yeah, I would say the Velcro hooks are the trans.
I can go right now. Actually, I have one.
Okay.
It could sound like, I really want to hold your pain right now, and you're really angry, and I feel all of the defensiveness showing up in my body, and I want to hold it, and I don't think I can. And so, or it's, I am so scared right now that if I share this feeling with you, that you're going to run away. It's sharing those vulnerable parts of you that you're afraid will get rejected. And my partners who have been betrayed are begging for transparency. They're begging to see the real you. And it's letting down some of those walls and letting the real you be seen. And not putting all of your stuff on your partner, but letting them into what your experience is, even if your experience might be uncomfortable for them or for you. Those are the hooks.
on the trade side, that's hey, I want to let you know that 15 minutes ago you asked me a question and I lied. In the moment I didn't want to face that, and now I want to try again, and I want to share with you truth. Yeah, that's a hook.
That's a great one. Mm-hmm.
Another one is I want to share with you that I will never do this again, and that that I'll never hurt you. And truth is I don't ever want to hurt you, but I'm fighting to figure out why I did what I did. And I don't know, and I'm scared that that's going to be enough.
Oh my gosh. That one, I remember you telling me that. I remember sitting in a parking lot outside of, I don't know, like a Starbucks or something late at night. And you said that to me. You said, I am fighting to never do this again. I don't want to ever do this again. And I can't promise you that I won't. I want to promise you that. But the reality is I know that if I stop doing my work, I can go back to old patterns. And I had equal parts of, I hate you. Just promise me you'll never do this again. And oh my gosh, that feels like truth, and that feels really good. And it creates safety. Like both of those things. It felt real. It felt honest. It felt accurate. And fear, my own fear and trauma comes up of like, oh my gosh, like, please just promise me you'll never do it again. And that message of, and this is what I hung on to, is I am here, I'm fighting, I'm going to continue to learn, continue to do my work. But I wanted so bad that promise you never do it again. But that was a hook. You told me something that I didn't love, that made me uncomfortable, but I also got to see you and got to have vulnerability, and I got to have real. And that created more safety in the long run.
Yeah. Okay, everybody, thank you for hanging out with us. I hope there was value in there for you. We always appreciate feedback. At the end of the day, not at the end of the day, we will send a follow-up with any resources and recording. But
I do have one more resource.
Yeah.
The Betrayal Bind by Michelle Mays.
Oh, yeah, you're digging this one.
I know. I used to always recommend Dr. Skinner's Moving Beyond Betrayal, but it's more clinical and it can be triggering for partners. But the Betrayal Bind by Michelle Mays, if I had it I have it on Audible, I would show it to you. But that one, I highly suggest every partner to listen to it, and every person who has betrayed their partner to listen to it. Really solid learning and education in there. And it's really relatable. The therapist has been through her own betrayal, so she's sensitive to it. And it's hard. And then again, this book, Trauma Recovery Guidebook for Therapists, written by Rachel Walker, is another one I recommend for understanding trauma. Really simple, cute pictures. So I recommend that too.
All right, everybody. It was good to hang out with you. Take care, and we'll talk to y'all later. See ya.
Good night.